Hey, this is Joe from EFI Wires, and in this video I'm going to give you an overview of the Layout tab. The Layout tab is currently experimental, which is why you see this icon on here. That lets you know that the features in here are brand new. They may be a little buggy, and they're certainly subject to change. Behaviors, look and feel, features, things like that, while I get feedback from users. So just keep that in mind as you use the tab. Know that this video could get outdated quickly as things change in here. So what the Layout tab is an area in the application where you can see your entire harness and how the wires are bundled together into branches, and it's laid out in a tree-like fashion, as you can see here. Let me give you a quick overview of this very simple project that I created to demo this. All it has is a Holley HP ECU, a couple temperature sensors, a coolant temp and an intake air temp sensor, and then it's got 8 coils and 8 injectors. A finished real harness would have a lot more stuff on it than this, but I'm keeping it simple for the purposes of this demo. First thing I'll go over is the terminology. So it's got nodes and branches, and you can see up here there's other sub-tabs for harness nodes, where you can see a list of all the nodes, and the harness branches, where you can see the branches. So what is a node? What is a branch? A node is just a point in the harness that has something specific, like a connector or a branch point, which in this case has a splice inside of it. On this end, it's all the connectors. Each one of these is called a node. And then the lines that connect the nodes are the branches. And the branch has a length. It will have other things associated with it, like the covering that's used. There's a label with the branch, and then if you double click on one, you can also see the wire segments that are inside that branch. So the one that I just clicked on has the coolant temp sensor, the intake air temp sensor signals, and then the sensor ground in it. That was this one right here. It also brought up a context dialog here. When you click on anything, the context dialog opens, and then it will have various buttons that are enabled or disabled based on what you have selected. Let's go over some of the basic operations. The first thing I'll show you is this diagram help icon up here in the right corner. Has a list of the basic things like panning and zooming and selecting items and such. So if you forget how to do something, check in here for a reminder of it. Some of the other buttons that are up here are a button to go full screen if you want a bigger work area. You can print the diagram if you want to have it on paper when you go start to actually build it. You can reset, you can zoom to fit. So when I show you how to zoom in a second here, using the mouse wheel in and out, you can just use this button to reset the zoom scale so that everything in the diagram is on the screen. And then you can reset the layout itself if you've moved things around and you want to get it back to the automatically generated state that the system would put it in. You can click on this icon to reset the layout. So to move nodes around, you just click and drag like you would normally click and drag anything. And you'll notice that when you do that, all of the downstream nodes come with whatever you're dragging. If you don't want to do that, if you just want to drag one item by itself, if you hold down the control key, then you can drag that, and then only the one item will move and everything else will stay anchored. Again, you can reset the layout anytime you want. Like I showed you a second ago, you can zoom in and out by rolling the mouse wheel. If you click and hold the mouse wheel or the center button on your mouse, you can pan. If you double click the mouse wheel or the center button, it's the same as zoom to fit. You can select one item at a time, or you can hold the control key and you can select multiple items, and that goes for branches and or nodes. One of the most useful features is the select by window. So when you drag a window to select items, it depends on whether you drag from the left to the right or the right to the left. You'll get two different kinds of windows. If you go right to left, the green window will select everything that is fully enclosed in it when you let go of the mouse button. If you select left to right, right to left, you'll get a dotted window which will select anything that crosses through that window in any way. That's very handy for selecting a bunch of branches, for example. So keep that in mind when you're selecting items. Now you may have noticed that it says not to scale here. That's because the lengths of these branches are not necessarily representative of how they're displayed on the screen or when you print them. For example, if I were to click this and drag this node around, you can see that the branch lengths are not changing. This is so you can just arrange things on the screen so that they look neat and you can tell what's going on, but you're not actually changing the underlying lengths in any of these branches unless you click on one, and then you can come in here and change the length. For example, change that from 36 to 24, and that automatically updated the lengths of all the wire segments that are inside that branch based on how much you changed the branch length by. And you can do that in mass by selecting a bunch at a time and then just typing a length. If you want to change a bunch at the same time, you can do that. You can do one at a time. And every time you do that, like I said, it's automatically updating the underlying wire segments. So that's one of the main features of this layout diagram, is to get the final lengths of all your branches dialed in after you've measured the car and you know where you want your nodes and branch points to be. So I've showed you how to work with the items in the diagram once they're there, but I haven't showed you how to get them in there yet. So let's take a step back. I'll close this window. I'm going to select everything in the diagram by doing Control A, and then you can either hit the delete key to delete items, or you can use the delete selected items button here, and it'll ask for confirmation. I'll go ahead and delete everything that was in this diagram, and you'll notice that this column on the left now has all the items in it again, because the way I actually start populating a diagram is by dragging items out of here and dropping them onto the screen. When I deleted everything, it deleted all the harness nodes, all the harness branches, but it's important to know it did not delete any of the connectors themselves or any of the wires. They're all still in the project. It was only deleting the layout nodes and harness nodes and branches for the project. Now, to get things onto here, when you first come in here, you'll have a list of all the items that are in the project, and you can just start dragging and dropping them into the workspace, and they automatically get wired up the way they are based on the wires between them. I usually start with the ECU, and it will create a node for the ECU, and it will create branches and nodes for items that have splices in them. That way when you add stuff that's on the other end of the splice, they'll automatically get connected to it. So for example, if I now want to add the coils, I can do one at a time, or I can select one and hold the shift key and select the last one. That gets everything in between. Just drag and drop it onto the diagram, and it automatically creates these branches and nodes for the coils. Now, when it does that, the lengths don't always come out the way you want them, and they can be kind of messy like this. So it might be helpful as you're getting started just to make everything the same length. Let's just pick a random length of like 48 inches. It makes it easier to see what's going on. And as I drag this node around. This is the node that has the coil power and the cylinder head ground splices in it, and you'll see all the coil connectors are out here. And then there's another node here that has the coil signal ground splice, and then they all go back as a single wire to the ECU here. What I want to do is, and then the signal wires for all the coil come through up the middle here. So what I want to do is I want to get these nodes merged together, and then I want to create another node here and merge them all together so that we have a single branch coming out to a branch point, and then from there they feed all the coils. So the first thing I'll do is just sort of arrange things so that I can have working space here. And if I do a crossing window across all of these signal wires here, you'll notice that there's an add branch point button. If I click that, it's going to add a branch point right here to all of those, and now I have branch point for all three sets of wires that are going out to the coils, and I can either drag and drop one onto another, or I can select them individually, and then I can say merge nodes here, and that will merge them all into one single node. Again, the links get kind of wonky here, so I'm just gonna change them all to something consistent for now. But you'll see we end up with a single branch that has all of the coil signals and the coil ground going out to it, to the branch point, and then from there it splits off to the individual coils, and then we can do things like add a boot here, and so on. But that's the basics of how you add items and merge branches. Let's do a couple more just to reinforce the topic. I'll drag all 8 injectors out here, and we'll do the same thing with the injectors. Let me set them all to 48 inches. And then I want to create a branch point on those. And then I want to merge those 2 branch points. And let's make this one 48. So there, I've got my injectors, I've got my coils, I've got a sensor ground here, but I don't have the sensors on yet. So let's add both of these sensors, and then we'll do the same thing with them. We'll need to select the 2 signal wires and add a branch point, and then we can take that branch point and merge it with that, and now we have our 2 temperature sensor connectors feeding through a common branch point for the sensor ground going back to the ECU. Another very useful feature of the layout diagram is the ability to select a branch and add an inline connector to it. This would be for like a bulkhead, or commonly breaking out your injector or coils into sub-harnesses. So I select one branch. In this case, I'm going to do the injector branch, the branch that feeds the injectors, and I'm going to click Add Inline Connector. And when I do that, it brings up this filter window, and it tells me I've selected 8 20 gauge wires, and it pre-fills the max cavities because it's going to search for connector pairs that will work for the set of wires that I've selected. So if I leave it at 8, it will only bring back connectors that have 8 cavities or fewer. I could bump it up to 10 if I want to look at, have some that have a couple extra spaces in them. I can filter by brand. Since we're sticking with Holley here, let's do Aptiv, and then click on the Find Inline Connector Pairs. And you can see it brought back a couple MP150 connector pairs, one that has 8 cavities and one that has 10 cavities. And if I click on one of these and open it up, you can see that not only did it choose the plug and receptacle that mate with each other, but it tells me where it's going to populate the wires when it creates these connectors. And it gives me the ability to rearrange things if I want to before it actually creates them. But once you're happy with the connector pair that you want to use, you click on use this pair and then confirm and apply it. And it creates two new connectors at that point in the harness. So now there's a C1 and a C2 that didn't exist before. If I double click on this, I can edit the node itself. This is connector pair 1 is what the CP1 stands for. If I go look at the connectors for the project, you can see that it's added a C1 and C2, and that the build sheet has been populated, so it did all the wiring for us just by selecting that. So I think that covers everything you need to know about how to use the new layout diagram. I think it gets us a big step closer to having a design studio that is actually useful, and you'll be able to design a harness from end to end and use it in a real production harness. So I encourage everybody to go give it a try, give me feedback. I think we're getting really close to getting this product out of beta. So I really do value your feedback, and let me know what you think. Thanks.